Bob Holman is an American poet and a poetry activist, most closely identified with the oral tradition, the spoken word, and poetry slam. As a promoter of poetry in many media, Holman has spent the last 4 decades working variously as an author, editor, publisher, performer, emcee of live events, director of theatrical productions, producer of films and television programs, record label executive, university professor, and archivist. He was described by Henry Louis Gates Jr. in The New Yorker as the postmodern promoter who has done more to bring poetry to cafes, bars than anyone since Ferlinghetti. He is the founder of the Bowery Poetry Club and the author of 17 poetry collections, most recently The Unspoken, Life Poem, The Cutouts, and Sing This One Back to Me. Holman has taught at Princeton, Columbia, NYU, Bard, and the New School. As the original slam master and a director at the New Yorican Poets Cafe, creator of the world's first spoken word poetry record label, Mouth Almighty Mercury, and the artistic director of the Bowery Poetry Club, Holman has played a central role in the spoken word, slam, and digital poetry movements of the last several decades. All told, he has performed well over 1,000 times around the globe, from Madison Square Gardens and rock stadiums to church basements and Ethiopian Teje beds, which are honey wine bars. Co-founder of the Endangered Language Alliance, Holman's study of hip-hop and West African oral traditions led to his current work with endangered languages. His film about loss and revitalization, Language Matters with Bob Holman, winner of the Berkeley Film Festival Documentary of the Year Award and aired nationally on PBS. Holman traveled for the film and led workshops at language revitalization centers across Alaska and Hawaii, sponsored by the Ford Foundation. His short film, Conce, Poem of Many Tongues, has lines of poetry in 50 languages, and premiered at the Margaret Mead Film Festival. In 2018, Holman was awarded for his work in language revitalization. His roots are in Harlan, Kentucky, and currently lives on the Bowery in New York City. So for more information on Bob, please visit his website at bobholman.com. So now I would like to introduce to you Bob Holman.
Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Good. Me too. 39 years ago today, Elizabeth Murray and I were married at New York City Hall. My pal Stu was the only other attendee, our witness, and then there was the clerk. When I went to hand him the wedding bands, he said, "No, I don't touch the rings." How many hustler grooms had accused him of the old ring switcheroo, the vanishing ring trick? I'd like to know. Elizabeth and I went on our first date January 4th of that year, 1982. She would give birth to our first child, Sophie, on the day after Christmas. So she was 7 months pregnant on October 22nd, 1982. Our daughter, Daisy, was born 2 years later, and now they have 3 daughters. Greg Deal's artist talk here Wednesday was illuminating, as all conversations with Greg are. He's always speaking to you from his base, his family, his wife and kids, and in this way, to me, he's a model for a new masculinity based at home, not out on the savannah bringing in the woolly mammoths. It's about time. Or as someone once said, all your base are belong to us. I want to thank ACA, Doris, and Edward, and David, and Margie, and Doug, and Nancy, and the 2 who helped me today to bridge the digital gap, Ivan Riascos and Elizabeth Allen Cannon. And a bow again to you, Greg, for pushing my vulnerability buttons. And to Amma Birch, Kimberly Dixon Mays, Crystal Guerra, Chev Guthrie, and Tennessee Reed, the poetry cohort here at ACA. Round of applause, please, for those who got me here and those who got me here. And this includes you visiting digitally. Please, Ivan has toggled the button so we can hear everybody in the space you are watching that screen. Let's hear it from you. This is for you all. I thought I'd begin here. I was born March 10th, 1948, at high noon in the little town of La Follette, Tennessee, not far from Oak Ridge, where my mother, Sally Ruth Lewis, coal miner's daughter, worked on the assembly line for the Hush Hush Manhattan Project that was constructing the world's first atomic bomb. She wore no protective gear, but was told to wash off after every shift. Many women died, starting just a few years later. Meanwhile, my father, Benjamin Franklin Geller, second son of the only Jewish family in Harlan, Kentucky, was 19 and fighting World War II in the Pacific. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in Harlan, Kentucky, memorialized in the folk song, "It's a Long Way from Harlan to Hazard." You could buy liquor in Hazard. And in Barbara Koppel's Academy Award-winning documentary, Harlan County, USA, about coal miners trying to unionize. You can stream it on HBO Max and Amazon. And years later, I'd become friends with Barbara Koppel's husband at the time, Hart Perry, who managed to hold on to his camera as he shoved to the ground and kicked over, creating one of the greatest cinematic shots in history. Now that's real Harlan, and that's another story. And here's another story. How about the Hawaiian people and language who taught me to understand the difference between where I'm from and where I was born? You're going to have to wait on that story. But I did spend months in Hawaii studying language and making language matters to understand that it was a fluke, my being born in La Follette, Tennessee. My grandfather, Solomon Geller, who was from Kamianets-Podolsky, now Ukraine, you know, I did a play there 4 years ago with the Lower East Side Ukrainian theater company, Yara Arts, which, you guessed it, is another story. Anyway, Solomon, kosher in Kentucky, had exiled my parents to Tennessee from Harlan because Ben had gone against his orders and married a shiksa. And that was Sally Ruth Lewis, of course, whose own mother died in childbirth and who herself died just this past April in a nursing home a week after my brother and I had finally visited her, kept away because of the COVID. She was 96. Another story is how she and Benny went on a honeymoon trip right near here, believe it or not, and how Benny, on a whim, got a license for an amusement park in Orlando. This was 1947, which Henry Louis Gates documents in the New Yorker. Ahead of his time, maybe an artist, surely suffering from PTSD, my father killed himself in 1950, a month after my brother was born. I remembered the yahrzeit candle. I was 2.5. He was 24. So I went to New York to be an artist, the first student from my rural high school to go to an Ivy school. I mean, Ginsberg and other big poets went there, and it was the farthest I could go to get away from the suffocating racist culture I grew up in. Kenneth Koch was my teacher, part of the New York school with Frank O'Hara and John Ashbery. I met Ginsberg and Baraka, the whole crew except Frank, who died the month before I hit New York. After college, I worked a taxi driver bartender gamut, and then got hired as a poet for the CETA Artist Project. CETA, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, was the largest federally funded artist project since the WPA. CETA's model of artists working directly for community groups who could never afford to employ an artist is one that I hope makes it into the new WPA, which is being discussed and which we all support as we emerge from the COVID. Come on, jobs. At 19, I wrote my first book, a book-length poem, while at the Cummington Community of the Arts, the year it switched from being a school to being a self-structuring community. I lived in a commune in Brooklyn that moved back to the land in Pennsylvania, the early 70s, when I also lived in Woods Hole on Cape Cod, my spiritual home, where I started a theater company that still exists. Our Wizard of Oz is talked about over dinner tables and at the fishmongers. I went to Woodstock and I left. Too much rain, too much mud. Janis Joplin kissed me 2 months before she died. Hitchhiked through Europe twice, spent 3 months in Africa. The CETA job showed me that I could actually work in the nonprofit sphere, and I got a job at the St. Mark's Poetry Project, 2nd Avenue and 10th Street, working with Bernadette Mayer and Eileen Miles. When my friend Mikey Pinheiro died, I helped Miguel Algarin reopen the New York Poets Cafe, New Yorican Poets Cafe, and imported the Poetry Slam from Chicago, where, at the New Yorican, it became the flashpoint for multiculturalism. You could go to college, to the African American Studies Department, the new Hispanic Department, Women's Studies, or you could come down to the New Yorican on a Friday night at 10, not a Wednesday at 8, not a Sunday at 3, which were the traditional hours for a poetry reading, and get all the multiculti perspective you'd want from the young poets who are actually living it. That was the birth of what we call spoken word. And I'm still working that part of the poetry world, spoken word, even when teaching at Columbia or Princeton or wherever. Yes, I was on the panel that selected Amanda Gorman to be the first ever National Youth Poet Laureate, and was tickled to see her capture the world's imagination for poetry, for spoken word, even if Ishmael Reed takes me to task for supporting what he calls a bad poem. Okay. Now I live 3 flights above the Bowery Poetry Club, which I founded in 2002. Elizabeth had a solo show at MoMA in 2005, 6 months after she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. We had 2 more wonderful years, including a trip to Venice to see her work in the Biennale. She died of cancer in 2007, the same year she had a solo show at MoMA. A retrospective in Buffalo just came down. Maybe you saw some slides of that or will. I did a performance there with 12 musicians and 5 dancers, but you can catch her till January 9th at the Carnegie Mellon Museum in Pittsburgh in Wildlife, a show with a super artist, IMHO, Jesse Reeves. And next Friday, I'm going to fly back to New York for the opening of a large show of hers at the Barbara Gladstone Gallery in Chelsea. Our 2 daughters and granddaughters now live in California. Sophie in LA, Daisy in Oakland. I lived through the COVID lockdown in New York, and like always, I wrote a poem about the interaction of art and politics that I could see right out my front window on the Bowery. This poem is a film, and we can talk about that later if you'd like, but now we're going to see it. This is what democracy looks like. Well, that was my intro, but I was thinking, since I'm following Greg and all your base are belong to us, why not start with Elizabeth Murray, who also did a book cover for me, I'll show that later, and my ekphrastic poems, ekphrastic, art inspired by other art, I wrote for her paintings, so you get a taste of performance, which is the way I always do these things, and then work this around it, but not today. Anyway, this film is directed by Christy Zia, who also directed Everybody Knows, Elizabeth Murray, which was on American Masters, and you can get a copy of that from PBS. This film we're going to see right now is called Talking Pictures, and it has a terrific music score by the great David Lang, composer, and the whole thing was tweaked, pummeled, and birthed by Maestro Charles Castor Dudzik. So you can roll it, Elizabeth. Are we ready to see Talking Pictures? All right, let's give it a shot.
her story. She is the E on top of two A's that stand for all aboard. The train is leaving, heading for the great Northwest. The other A is at the end of Florida. She is wearing glasses. No, that is a cup. No, that's a chair. There are 3 white triangles and 1 white almost triangle. They are the wall showing through the painting that becomes part of the painting. She sits on a green chair, and there is a book on her lap that is a butterfly.
She's heading out. She's taking the table with her. She's swinging open the table. She is the table. She's lifting her skirts. She's stepping out. She's stepping out of the painting. She's heading for the yellow door with green squiggles. She's taken the whole painting with her. But she is not saying goodbye. There are 4 squares. Each square is a painting, and all together, they're flying. By the top square is a red table with 3 red legs. And next there is a green table with 4 green legs. The legs criss and they cross. They zag, zig, dance, and trip over and under each other till the giant goblet on the red table tips over, spilling blue liquid, big glops of water just flying by. "96 tears. Jumping out at you is the giant heart of rock and roll. A big lime green square looks like a blank canvas or screen, which can tell is leaping out because the 5 lime green lines of motion directly to the right of the green canvas, which is, of course, also the bottom of the upper left table leg. That's what's doing the dance. It's clearly dancing, dancing, dancing. Table legs akimbo. Do the limbo, do the twist, the cavort, the blister blast off. Plop out those sweat globules. Or maybe they are the tears. That's right, there are 22 of them. So only 74 to go. Coming right at you, folks, this gallivanting tabula rosa symposa that has freed the purple planets from the galaxy of polka dots. Whipping, lashing, turning, crashing, jamming, ramming, winding up, winding down, flip, flop, and flop, flipping, glop, slopping, and just plain popping and rocking, corners, caroming and zooming. What I'm saying is curling the hurly, burling, flinging and zinging, can't miss but hit, never be done with it. All the way to the end of the song, 3 minutes, 6 seconds by Question Mark and the Mysterians. This painting is so big you can stand under it and it will protect you from the rain. Except it has holes in it. Drip, drip. Perhaps you have a question or two for this jumbo question mark. 1. What is life? 2. Art. 3. What am I doing here anyway? Drip, drip. The big question marks itself all over the wall. punctuated by these jaggedy cracks, painted all black, which was once all orange. Before that, green, originally red, with 4 white, spindly laces that cross the painting and always end in shoes. And in each shoe, a hole, and through the hole, the white wall. The painting breaks up into 6 pieces, a puzzle waiting for you to put together. Each giant lobster claw snaps and grabs at the next. The dot beneath the hook of the question mark is cracked in 2 and whitewashed, and the underside of the crook of the hook is also white. It's as if they want to connect and become a circle. Is that what the question mark wants? To turn into a circle? Is that the answer? The answer to the question mark's question. The answer to the question mark's question is turn into a circle. If you look quite closely at the bottom left melting corner tentacle, you will see a tiny foot with 4 toes on a long leg. Not one of the blue chair's 4 legs. It is trembling before this painting, whose corners are melting into the hole that is the frame of the painting. Oh, creamy amoeba booty, let's dive into the painting. Sometimes you just have to make it up. So you want a lot of canvases exploding all over the wall. It's a Caspian blue wall. And then the corners of the wall twist like the corners of a handkerchief. The red pieces spell out a secret code, all connected by tiny cracks. And they make up a table that has 4 legs. And the clouds coalesce into a figure. A ghost figure is all around through the painting. Inside and through the table, she is, as you can see, giving the painting a raspberry. Her tickling tongue creating just enough wind to blow the handkerchief across the room. Here's a table for you, a big green table, those 4 squarish canvases again, 3 green legs, and wait a minute, the other leg is orange, misplaced. A 5th canvas, table leg shaped, whoosh waving, vibrating. Perhaps it is like the leaf of the table, as the title suggests, and it is falling past the white chair that is painted blue on the brown floor. The leaf is emerging from a yellow-orange-olive energy patch, pierced by its needle-nose stem, or is that a shadow of where the leg was? The energy patch shadow mirrors the orange smear on the table the leaf leg has fallen from. It's falling right off the painting, like a leaf. In the Renaissance, the silhouette of the viewer brings you into the painting. Here, the dancing painting is feeding the silhouette.
Or it could be that the figure is speaking the painting. The crazy, bejeweled jumble of a painting, Rubik's Cube, uncubed in an ethereal blue aura. The table legs push right through the figure's foot. The heels of her shoes are also cracking off. The jewels of the table are cracking off like the heels of the shoes, and the room has a red floor and a brown and blue wall, and the whole painting is totally cracking up.
Now, the paintings may touch, but they may not overlap. And the Delft blues and the American blues are happening when the cup has two handles, and the liquid inside rises up, an alphabet of sleep language from a smiling gargantuan, and the frame just blues around the beautiful bluing, and wow, what? You gonna sleep through the ocean storm? The rollicking riot can't be contained. Whoa, it's unfinished! It's time. It's morning again in this world of poor mutts. One sip,
And you get to slide into your part.
wake up! The cycle of the human condition moves from the idea through the body to the bone. The idea gets its idea from the body and it just shoves it up
To the skeleton, which flies and dances and pulls this thing from the body, turning it into thought. The thought balloons into a yellow spot. A yellow spot. The eye of being. The single being. You can plant it in the earth and a baby pops out. And it grows and it dances and it ages and it's going to be fed and then it's going to feed others and it's going to make things. It's hovering and it's sighing and then it dies and it rots until only the idea remains. The idea of the idea.
I was talking, you were talking, we were talking, and talking was talking. We were talking with this cloud. The cloud came out and it was not blue globs of storm. It was a frothing possibility fantasy that set all colors in motion. The black cup was laughing, and the yellow cup understood it. It was laughing back. And luckily, they realized there's all the same cup.
And just at that moment, they realized that they were two becoming one. And it was all framed in red, and no one could tell what would happen next. But we kept on talking and talking until we realized that we were kissing just in time. When we put the girls to sleep, Elizabeth and I would often put on the cassette of Stay Awake, the Disney lullaby, as produced by Hal Wilner. We loved the perfect irony of Mary Poppins extolling the kids to stay awake when, in their consistent contrariness, that would lead them instantly to sleep. Or maybe it was Suzanne Vega's voice.
Bonnie Raitt was on that album too. She was singing Baby of Mine with Was Not Was, which was the song that Dumbo's mother sang when little Dumbo was in her trunk. You see, that's the trunk curling there. The whole painting is a cup, and of course, there is a table on the cup. There's usually a cup on the table, but not in Stay Awake. The legs are laces and they curl up through all of the elephant ears and the cup handles, and Stay Awake is on your shoulder and you're playing a tune that will keep us awake all night in a dream. Despair. Not that pair. May I tie my shoes together with yours?
There are two water girls, really. There's the thoughtful blue head that dawns from the cup body, the cup handles for hands and arms, and a waist, those sweet little flippers. And in number two, the thought balloon becomes a blue bouffant, and the wall is her white face. She may be Japanese. And now the hands are larger and come around her face, frame her, and then there's her brown, orange, and two-handled, and the feet are dancing below. Since she's singing, the song gets sung. Oh, water girl, she sends movement and charm, and the mountains alarm. Oh, water girl, oh, I can't stop thinking of you now.
Stay awake, don't rest your head. Don't lie down upon your bed while the moon drifts in the skies. Stay awake, don't close your eyes.
Thank you. Um, I want to say hello to Hal Wilner, my first friend to die of COVID in March 2020. Hal produced my first record and was a dear friend with a storied career, music director at Saturday Night Live, and I miss him. It was in a studio next to his office that Suzanne Vega sang Stay Awake for the movie. I've got two poems left, but if anybody's got any questions about this one, we can wait. Okay. All right. And then, of course, you in Zoomland use your keyboards. Okay, you've heard me talk about the three consciousnesses, right? Orality, literacy, and digital. To me, this is not evolution, it's not progress, simply the Homo sapiens inventing new ways to communicate with each other. Orality, first consciousness, is still present, hence this talk. books are still in use. So let's take a look at these books over here. The first is Life Poem, the poem I mentioned, the book I mentioned earlier. Yes. What can I say? I wrote this book when I was 19, and there I am. It came out last year along with another book, The Unspoken. Is that it? Oh, no, here's Aloud. Okay, this is the book I edited with Miguel Algarin. Has become the Bible of the spoken word movement, now in its 17th printing, I hope. Okay. And here's The Unspoken. That's the book that came out simultaneously, written 50 years after the first one, Life Poem. Who knows? Who cares? Why bother? How come? What possible difference could it make? As you see, it was originally titled, this was from the publisher, Bob Holman and the Unspoken Word Movement, but we sort of trimmed it down a little bit. And a book, of course, is non-oral, so it's unspoken. Next up is the book that where Elizabeth did the cover. It's called The Collect Call of the Wild, which was very funny when it came out, but nobody knows what a collect call is anymore, so and the final book we're going to look at here is the India Journals, which is the accompanying text for Ginsberg's Karma, a movie I made with Ram Devanini about about Ginsberg and the beat poets traveling in India and the birth of the hippie in the U.S. and around the globe. I don't think I'm going to have time to show this film made with Ram Devanini. We've made many movies together, but the URL is going to be dropped in the chat, and I've got these cards over here for you guys in the audience, so you get a card, and on the card it's free to see at on the net. Okay, I'm now going to show Kansai, which is the poem in 50 languages. Once again, these languages, of the 7,000 languages in the world, or 6,500 as it states in here, only about 10% of them are written down. Of course, those are the 99% of the languages in the world, but that 1 or 2% that still exists are people who live in their mother tongues in an oral world. That's where you want to go when you want to visit griots or the people where oral poetry, spoken word if you want, is just still the method of communication with people. So let's see. I do admit it took me 9 years to make this thing, and it's not finished. And it's translated solely into that bully language, English, but there are plans to translate it into all the languages in the film. All it takes is a little of the do-re-mi, right? And poetry cohort, please get out your notebooks and pick your favorite poet as the poem scrolls by. Okay, this is your cue, Elizabeth, to start Kansai. Thank you.
Chatakdach ziad, tlach as yatag.
Lito buna kaleh metike.
Namawi Rui, Namawi Tapatawi Ponan, Wanyil Namawi Tungara Tumbiwalan, Ngayambun.
Ui sai chưa ta vậy hồi.
Fonua, Kakai, Anga Fetu Utaki.
Mai cuma nangi ewa ilan kasuruan, apo ni mema intana.
Mapia ipatuloy taweta ilimi, kun nasi maggaramamu kami.
هذا مختلف مرحم لك تبخط ولا نرسو كل يدي جيم وشاهم دخو ودبون هم صرف قلنا ولو زوي دني على طيب تبو
إمهن وترين كابان هوكشي كيسوكي كينان
Nishin China Mala Nuda World. I am the tongue and the kidnapper sack.
Simukufuluka kwabo banafulukanaga mihiso yakaziko banyindu barikelama mumira ndeto yetu y'ikinyindu yanagenda gigandagana.
Destin, c'est pas pour nous finir mal.
My name is Yagea. It means she remembers.
Uvu mai apa mai e I aipa ivo I kelongo. Uvu mai apa mai e I kapulai ke kapulaisa.
Iya teman, kau jin ke kuaraku, kuarakin, kuarak.
Motuie ta pepe sihie os otuenza pa sonoeano emo koshi tifeangou
turgun ai alin ochi hojekhe hojen bira ochi oboro oton
Tufalo nyipu nyawe seu mal ke fin tien ruka ka kuduf negumion mameke eniu ni lokko.
Holy bisa, nashilinak, holy bisa, nashilinak. Jako mente e bush koko.
Jaga junda shamawit chanyu shalene nyu tung poare shalenyang to galiet
kan no bula ma bar bagan kan belmenu kan ngajil kali gut mulo ko din ngada
Kosame Yohtiko Piekanyundi ishateva tavas
Audition. That's beautiful. And then she would say, Yiben. Disgusting.
Beli lugela kanibani mcheto yidru neriunda stigira maniwini lukayaga mula uyaga titija mabianda
Hededul ut kungum ayat atna akjalk awas slu. De hartkanten sen mi mekeji kanja sen kanten kanja surahan sen mi jirge
ya kikina mgongolo yala abada wotu ranan le moyele aywa dama kuna nyokoro kikina musabab de kuna mo de mo bandi pile mayna na monia
Somewhere tomorrow. I'm coming back tomorrow.
వత్తాముకు దిన్ను జవళ్ళే ధ్రియతి వాట్ అబ్బాయికి వత్తాముకు దిన్ను జవడే సెతులు పోసి చేస్తే నిజం నేను
Hizkuntza batek ez du hormarik eraikitzen. Kolorez pintatzen ditu.
se gbele isa mo fala na an ko ku me gbele a fo ma di ko fi ne fo
Hayat ki lasting, what obscures falls away. Hayat ki.
Erişelmeyimiz o güzellikke kan döküp
ne eya ya ne
Walanki yobin kuntu idal na kola si jubai si kayop ye aki takto
boha mi ye chahle akam cheule kila ole aku kilep namina oh oh
chamu yetu
nan balla ko talla bage bazardan balla ko talla
زوان قانا إذا تقرنيا ختعم جوال لو كلملم
Produced with City Lore, which is the urban folk organization, which also is responsible for the next and last poem film that we're going to see. And it was done with the help of the Endangered Language Alliance, which I co-founded in 2010, and you got to visit their website. And again, I'll call out if anybody has a specific question about this. Good. Whoops, there is one. 9 years, it took 9 years. And it's only because Steve told me that I had to stop. I was really going to try to go for 100 lines, but 50, whatever. So it's about half done, I would say. But it's a good length, right? 15 minutes. There you go. Okay, the Urban Folklore Center located 2 blocks from the Bowery Poetry Club. Okay, and in a minute we'll see a project that City Lore and the Endangered Language Alliance are working on together. Right now, the final film, 5 minutes long. Thank you all for your attention. is, right now I got to show you the poetry spots. This is how I started making film for television. Danny O'Brien came up to me and said, what about putting poets on TV? And I was going to hit him because TV was the enemy of poetry. But then I thought, well, if you can actually see the poem on television, this was about 1986. So at that time, WNYC TV was a public television station owned by the city of New York. Rudy Giuliani sold it. It's now New York One. The NPR station managed to raise enough money to buy itself. But you can go out there on poetry spots and see all these people. There's Baraka, Paul Beatty, et cetera, Roberto Bedoya. Anyway, lots of people. Ginsberg is on here, and Eileen Miles declaring herself president. So go out and watch poetry spots someday. And it's been up there for about a year, but we haven't officially launched it yet because of the COVID. So this poem we're going to see now is the poem that I described at the beginning before I switched gears. It's what happened out my front window during the COVID apocalypse in New York, March and April 2020. And Elizabeth, it's finally time for the last poem of this talk. It's called This is What Democracy Looks Like. This is what democracy looks like. Murals on the Bowery. Bring back Bowery Project. Bleaker than bleaker. Barer than nada in Nadia. A plywood desert out my window on the Bowery. A siren of silence. Blind leading the blinder. Looters, cops, bruder brutes. Systemic collapse and a sick rose, slashed tiredness, buffeted by pandemic waves. Racism pulls nerves from our bodies using iron stupidity clips. Fascism allaying hot macadam on our wounds. The leadership, is tyranny. And then the artist got a hold of it. Sprung rhythm, art garden splash, walls blossom, Black Lives Matter. Many's the days and many's the ways and many's the time come before, as the dead and the dying and the violent lying wait covidly, patiently next door. The Bowery resurrects. Now there's a next. See, there's a lot more to go than's before, and the art that you see lifts infinity as you stop dead in your footsteps and roar. Up the ladder with the brush and rush. Yes, there's hardly a clown in the sky. Scooters punched them in their plywood nose, so stop your gab and chatter. Spell out Black Lives Matter. The flowers beckon. A good luck spot, I reckon. Emmett Till is still here. Dressed in colorful crack, a blessing for the homeless. Bowery Mission's sidewalk is tattooed with poem's shadow. No one shall utter the debt owed to wonder. All together now, call out the name. That's not anonymity's face on the wall of grace. George Floyd is breathing again. More art than's ever been seen before. It's a gift. It's capitalism's grave. There's no one to recall, bounce back from the fall into summer heat's saving grace. There is no justice in America, but it is the fight for justice that sustains you. Baraka says that crossed from his pad on Cooper Square. Hetty still lives there, and the murals that give sustain us on the streets where we live.
Individual power dies twice every hour to be born down in utopic Foley Square. I saw you on your bike with your mask and your strike and the placards that gleamed in the pools of your dream. Oh, artists, indefatigable rascals of love. The looters and shooters and dumbass computers lie down in the middle of the street. But BLM keeps on marching. It's the Bowery's fortune, and the past is the future again. Don't tell us what to do with the nail and the screw, with the paint and the roller, bucket and rags in a stroller. Dance on the graves of the rich and enslave those who'd profit from sweat that's not theirs. Lift your horn, lift your voice. It's for you. Make the choice. It's the people's history. Free art on the Bowery, the garden of power. Contemplation's bower, down on the Bowery, where art knows how to live.
Again, that was made with City Lore, the Urban Folklore Center, and Steve Zeitlin and I are now working on a project for the Poem Mobile, which we can cut to here if we want to, Elizabeth. We're going to be visiting the Purple States to promote dialogue between the warring factions through poetry. Wish us luck. This is the Poemobile doing an Endangered Language Alliance event. You can see it's the all-you-can-speak buffet with different languages being available. And of course, the Poemobile itself, which actually runs, is is covered with 100 poems in 30 different languages. And there it is with wings and everything. Next slide. Yeah, oh yeah, this is the project. You get a hand. You don't. It's really a digital hand, but you fill it in with words like this to say where I'm from, and so where you're from is from your ideas, not necessarily the location. And the next slide coming up is the Poemobile at night. We party, and the next one is
that's it, Bob.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Well, we had that link to the link to City Lore, which is where you would go to fill out your own hand and to write a poem for crossing the Great Divide. Okay, so that's the show. No encores today. And do you have any questions, anybody?
Anybody that has questions, please come to the mic. And also online Q&A.
I guess we answered. Yeah.
Hold on. I think I saw Q&A online.
Did you, hey poets, did you pick out a line from the Kansai? If not, I know Tennessee did. I know you did. I'm talking to everybody else.
Hey, I have a question for you, Bob.
Okay.
You seem like you're constantly going full speed on the whole artistic part of the poetry. Is it hard for you to slow down, or do you revel in the speedness and the way it comes at you?
Well, I never talk about this except when Greg Deal does, and then I get permission all of a sudden to be somebody other than the guy who's going full speed all the time. But you know, I go out to California 3 or 4 times a year, and you know, both Sophie and Daisy and their families are very happy to see me because it means they can have some time off. Because Boppy, as they call me, is great to hang out with the babies. I love babies. What can I tell you? So yeah, and let me also say that during COVID, I mean, it doesn't look. I mean, you know, you get breaks and you find funding and you got collaborators and partners like Ram Devanini and Steve Zeitlin, who, you know, all you do is come up with the ideas and they got to go get the grants and everything. So, you know, that's part of the job, guys. But I do hope that new WPA comes along. And even though it was tough for me after, you know, being tossed into jail for protesting against the Vietnam War, to all of a sudden have to admit that I was working for the feds. But it's a great job. You know, I like working in community. It's not for everybody. It's not for all artists. But we worked 4 days a week in community service, and 1 day a week was given to us for studio. And by a day of community service, what is that? You know, it could be 8 hours, but rarely. You know, so, you know, I'm gung ho. There's a group called the United States Department of Arts and Culture that you can look up. It's not a federal agency. It's just a bunch of, you know, poetry organizers. I can't say activist anymore after Greg told me that I have to be a disruptor or I'm going to get kicked out. So how can you disrupt the disruptors, Greg? I don't know. But anyway, so another question maybe?
Yeah, I have one question. Is there a theme that I mean, you seem like you write about a lot of things, you touch on everything. Is there a theme that you always find, one that you keep coming back to throughout your work, and then is there another theme that you find difficult writing about?
Well, I've never talked about, you know, my personal life in a public situation until today. But that's talking about it. I've written a lot about it. I wrote a lot of poems for Elizabeth, and I've written poems for my daughters and grandkids and everything. So that, you know. But really the theme I keep coming back to is the stuff that makes poetry, which is words, you know? And that miracle of learning how to read, which is entering into second consciousness. And then unfortunately, you learn how to learn, which is a drag, because then language, you know, demonizes itself with subjects and verbs and adjective and endings of words and all that kind of stuff, which is fun to learn, but again, it keeps you away from the real stuff. But poetry is made out of words, don't forget it, just like paintings are made out of paint, and music is made out of harps and harpsichords and harmonicas. Come on, son.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
You were talking about the dominance of English. I don't know, you used a better phrase than that.
Bully language.
The bully language. And I'm doing this project using Mandarin and Russian as like case studies for kind of the lack of nuance in English. So I'm curious, like, for you in the process of making that piece, is there like some kind of depth of understanding that you had found in the misunderstanding? I mean, I guess they were reading, you know, a line of poetry, so we got to know, you know, in the translation what they were saying. But like, if there's something that, just like some kind of, you know, what were your takeaways from that?
Well, thank you, Sonia. The first takeaway is that everybody who's in the film was really excited to be in the film. You know, they loved attention coming to their language. And, you know, there's a website that talks about each of the groups or poets, or gives the full poem up there in Issue. I think it's called ISSUU or something like that, is the platform. But, you know, it's one of those great things where people love to find the untranslatable, and something is lost in translation, but something is also gained, right? And what we gain is just a way into that language as different as the cultures may be. You get a way in, and then you got to spend your time finding a further way in, you know. The thing about these oral languages is they ain't written down so you can't study them, which is what the hip-hop poets have been saying to me. You can't study this stuff because we just make this shit up, you know. And then there is that oral tradition, that lineage that will take you back to Africa, you know, and there you can hear it again. But anything can be translated into any other language. It's just that it's not going to carry that culture that's the understory of it all. There are a few examples of things that I don't think can be translated. And this is one of the reasons why it's important to keep languages alive. For example, Iwaja, the language that is being sung up here, I'm not going to take a shower piece, is Iwaja has no left and right. Okay, so it's all the north, south, east, west. So you say, could you move your foot a little to the southwest? Which means that in Iwaja, the person is not the center. It's just you're another thing there on this planet, moving along in the directions like everybody else. So that's something that I think can't be translated. But to find those things in each language is very rare, and you know, they get evolved out. Capitalism wants you to have a left and a right. So does politics, you know? So that's, you know, but I think it's great to show the lack of nuance in English, even though the English dictionary is the biggest dictionary on the planet. You know, it's so much bigger. You know, how come? And you can't find the nuance. Well, it's because some of the shorter languages with fewer words may have richer meanings for them.
Is there a poem that you've written that stays in your mind? Do you have one that has stayed with you? Which one has stayed with you the longest?
There's a poem called Relationship. In order to save the relationship, we will never see each other again. What do you think? Well, the relationship, come on, guys. You don't want to save the relationship. You want to save your love, right? Anybody else? Was that long enough? Then there's my poem, Love Poems. I love poems. Or how about my poem for COVID, you know? Why get out of bed? You're just going to get back in again. Or there's another poem for COVID that goes, the plague, it comes along every 100 years. Get used to it, you know? Okay, I could keep going. How to wake up. 1, go to sleep. Oops, okay. Yes.
I got 2 questions from Jessica, one of the ACA staff. Question 1, what is your creative process? And question 2, do you run out of ideas?
So I couldn't hear the second one, Ivan.
Do you run out of ideas?
Not yet, you know. Creative process is, you know, I love being a poet. You know, it's harder to be a novelist, I think, you know, or maybe novels, and I think novelists say the same thing. In fact, a lot of poets become novelists. Is that just because novelists get paid and get movies made? It's possible. But, you know, as a poet, you're always on the lookout for something you don't know what it is, you know, and that's Not that that's the way all poems start. Other poems start by applying the seat of one's pants to the seat of one's chair and staying there, or trying to translate something from a language that you can't read. That's another way to do it. Well, like there's a lot of these quote prompts, end quotes, that you can try out to write your poems, and they can work or not, though usually you'll come out with a workshop poem, which is what we're graduating a lot of in this, right now. But inspiration comes like it did, there was a red-headed woodpecker today. I didn't know they were around here. And there was that tortoise that lives underneath my boardwalk. Yeah, the natural world, I think, is full of things. But, not to shy away from anything. Poets believe in no censorship, so put it in there. And my practice is to write as much as possible, and I generally write with a pen in a journal, in a notebook. That's the way I do it. Though sometimes I start right on the computer. And I would like to start with doing oral, having Siri write my poems for me. But I haven't got that far yet. I promised Elizabeth and Ivan that I would learn Keynote and what's that other one starts with a P?
PowerPoint.
PowerPoint. I'm going to learn that so that I don't have to lean on these people anymore. For me, I was saying, so I'm pretty analog. We were born in a different consciousness. So excuse me, that that's the way I learned. I'm learning new tricks, but.
So Bob, I just want to inform you that I want to me and Elizabeth, you need to give credit for the collaboration on this presentation, by the way.
Could somebody translate that for me? Did I say I wanted Elizabeth and Ivan to get collaborative credit? I did so at the very beginning, where I said, I'll read it. It's right here in black and white. Where is it? And the two who helped me bridge the digital gap today, everybody else just gets their first name mentioned, like Edward Albee, Doris Lipper, David White, Margie Pabst, Doug, who's here right now, and Nancy, we know. Okay, Ivan Riascos and Elizabeth Allen Cannon. Let's give them a big round of applause. And that's it for today, folks. Write your poems.